This is The Process Shot. I'm Michael. I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen I Walked with a Zombie, a sort of horror drama from director Jacques Tourneur from 1943. It follows the unusual events that befall a nurse named Betsy, who is hired to care for the wife of a plantation owner living out in the Caribbeans. As she becomes integrated into the local society, she also comes to learn of the rather tragic history of her patient, Jessica, her husband, Paul, and his half-brother, Wesley. As Betsy begins to fall in love with Paul, who feels guilt for his wife's condition, she resolves to cure her in order to make him happy. However, this plan runs into some trouble when traditional cures don't work, leading her to seek the help of the native islanders and their voodoo practices. That doesn't quite seem like a horror movie for the most part, but things do steer closer to the usual genre conventions later on in the film. Even so, the actual horror stays a bit more atmospheric and psychological, with an ambiguity as to what is the result of a true curse and what is just a manifestation of guilt. It's a bit pared back from this aspect compared to Tourneur's previous movie, Cat People, or it's at least less overt in what is and isn't true. In any case, there's still a fair amount of character drama at play, developed rather thoroughly and to the point that their story takes up more attention than the horror. It's not completely perfect, as the characters do end up falling into general roles within the narrative, but at least they have a nice chemistry with each other, and individually they play their parts with a rather impressive amount of heft, giving the story a sense of weight and realism, which in turn gives the horror the same. So it all works out in the end, I suppose. Anyways, the technical aspects of I Walked with a Zombie are also what give the atmosphere some weight as well. Much like Cat People, there's a great amount of attention to light and shadow, with these elements of film noir hiding and highlighting details in the many nighttime scenes. This especially comes into play when Betsy begins looking into voodoo, and suspense begins to build as it begins to follow her as well, with shadows managing to hide everything and everybody lurking around. Cuts to close-ups do also add a bit of shock value, but they're used pretty sparingly. Sound design for the film is similarly tense, with silences that permeate these scenes and emphasize the emptiness, and conversely louder noises and music to help draw attention to other details, whether it be footsteps, a ritual, or a ballad of unrequited romance. Now that I say that out loud, it seems obvious, but it's also a more detailed way of saying the movie doesn't have a notable music score. Anyways, editing also helps to keep the atmosphere within the story spread out through keeping to rather long takes, never really cutting all too much, and simply letting whatever happens happen. Simply put, everything seems to just fall into place, and altogether it makes for a rather beautiful experience, even if it's not quite in line with traditional horror. If anything, though, I think this movie ought to be considered more as a fine follow-up to Cat People, and one that certainly cements the director's creative visual style, crossing horror and noir almost perfectly. I Walked with a Zombie. Jacques Tourneur, 1943. 4 stars. I recommend giving it a watch when you can. That's it for me. If you like this review, leave it a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. I do wish there were a bit more hard horror in the movie. Might have been fun to see an early take on zombies. Well, early-ish, I guess.